While it was the gold rush that drew the first Chinese immigrants to America, the history of how Chinese laborers helped build the country kicked off in the 1860s with the construction of the Transcontinental Railroad under the helm of American industrialist Leland Stanford.
He was looking for the hardest workers, the best laborers to build the railroad and connect the remaining part of the 1,700 miles of track from the West Coast and the middle of America. And he said, why not the Chinese? They built that wall.
20,000 Chinese men worked on the western section of the railroad, accounting for as much as 90% of that workforce.
My great-grandfather, he was able to save money working on the railroad, go back to San Francisco and be a partner in a general store.
The bustling quarter is the center of life for Chinese immigrants. Mostly laborers, young men far from their families. Chinatown is home.
Chinatown is home, and it always will be. My mother was born in the year 1900 in San Francisco's Chinatown, and she lived in Chinatown throughout her entire life.
Ocean of bitter dreams, the Chinese must go and entry denied. But what was really going on in Chinese America? They're going to school, they're having baby contests, none of which is reflected in the narrative that's shown there. 25% of the miners in California in 1860 were Chinese, and by 1870, it became 58%.
Chinatowns, like what remains of this one in Coloma, extended from Downeyville all the way down to Mariposa along Highway 49. Stores, banks, and schools were established in these mining areas to create thriving settlements.
Every one of these small towns in the lower mountains had a Chinatown.
Most have since been destroyed or abandoned. Brian says little exists to remind people of the importance of Chinese settlers in early state history.
If you look and study the photographs carefully, you'll see much better than some of the written history of what the life of Chinese Americans was like for the past 150 years. You'll see pictures of people celebrating, they're going to banquets, they're doing a lot of different things. But it wasn't all a question of cheap labor or they're working on the railroad.
The broader picture Brian paints tells the story of success among Chinese settlers. The gold they found helped to finance a reform movement, then a revolution in China, and then lent to successful businesses in California, like his grandfather's shop that stood in Marysville for more than 100 years.
He had 9 children, and all his children were born in that building. If all you've heard about your history is that you were poor and willing to do anything for a couple of dollars, that doesn't instill pride in you. But if you see the broader picture, then perhaps you have a better understanding of your heritage.
From San Francisco to New York, visitors flock to Chinatown for food and souvenirs. In the last 3 decades, Chinese immigrants from Taiwan and then mainland China arrived as students and then stayed in the U.S., says University of Southern California, Los Angeles professor Min Zhou.
They want to buy or rent houses rather than live in apartments, and they also want to find good school districts. So Chinatown is not attractive to them.